Now, I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who have heard of Eric July, better known as Young Ripper 59. Eric July's been on YouTube since 2008, and even I, who likes his PG Woodhouse and a nice dose of Jeeves and Wooster, finds his brand of rap versus heavy metal music rather exhilarating. But Eric July is a very interesting fellow. I agree with many of his takes when it comes to pop culture entertainment. For example, the fact that Miles Morales is a tokenized character, because if you don't know what the meaning of that phrase is, it's when you have an established character like Peter Parker as Spider-Man, but then suddenly you race swap him for somebody like Miles Morales, who's got exactly the same power set, maybe a couple of different abilities, but he's essentially the replacement for Spider-Man for obvious reasons, which is why it has often been said Peter Parker is Spider-Man, Miles Morales is just Miles Morales, and I totally agree with that. And the reason why I highlight this thing about Eric July, because he's achieved something in the last 48 hours which other kickstarting campaigns can only imagine would happen to them in a few months. So what is it that I'm talking about? Well, Eric July, he's the man behind the Ripperverse, and he's launched the Ripperverse comics. Now, if we go over to Bounding Into Comics, I'll actually talk about this article very quickly. So, basically, what Eric July has done, he's launched his first comic book called ISOM #1 on his own website. Now, what is very interesting in this article, and this was on the 12th of July, so if we go on down here, I'll talk about these illustrations and my feelings about this comic book in a few moments. But if we just go down here on the event, right, here we go. So the day this was published on Bounding Into Comics, now, the campaign goal is $1 million. And by this time, okay, it was $458,000 that was already raised. 75 days to go, based on 4,269 purchases. So, as of today, of the recording for this video, the current revenue they've raised, and remember, a few moments ago, I said there was 75 days to go. I think it's now 73 days to go. So, $1,294,374.75 has been risen in just over 48 hours. Isn't that insane? When you compare this to the very woeful Moses Ingram Reaver lightsaber campaign, as somebody said on today's live stream for Geeks and Gamers, Gono Reaver. I loved it. Again, you know my feelings about this particular character and Obi-Wan. It was just a dreadful series altogether anyway. But if we just scroll on down, look at that. The target was $5,000. They only had 1,413 backers. So it absolutely serves them right. I don't actually give a shit. But when we go back to Eric July and the Ripperverse, now here's what I have to say about this, okay? There's a great trailer where Eric July just sits in front of the camera in some like massive studio, and he's got like a couple of cameras catching him from different sides, and he's talking about the fact that he's put $200,000 of his own money into this company, into this campaign. There are no outside backers, no marketing, so to speak, except for what they're doing internally. The website's had a bit of a few issues at the moment. Like when I've tried to register, I can't do it at the moment. So I'm sure they're fixing that, which is pretty cool in my books. Eric July, he's one of these guys that he's very matter of fact, you know, he'll just tell you how it is. So for me now, when I see I think the artwork is pretty good. You know, I won't lie. Cliff Richard, not the Cliff Richard, is a Brazilian comic book artist. He's one of the few artists that Eric has enlisted to illustrate ISOM #1. Eric has said that he's got a few more surprise artists and comic book writers that he's going to reveal over the course of the next few months. But right here, you know, you got this character. Now, the one thing I'm going to say about this character of ISOM, at the moment, I don't find anything appealing about this character. However, there are two things that makes me curious about everything that's happened so far. So for me, Eric July, he's the writer of this character and this comic book series. The way he's going to base this character, it's from the ground up. He's not a replacement for Superman or Shazam or anybody like that. ISOM is going to be his own individual hero. He might have inherent superpowers that we might associate with another superhero, but then again, if Eric July is going for a pure original comic book hero, I believe he'll just go out of his way just to avoid any comparisons to other established superheroes already. So you've got these various tiers that you can go for. There's a $35 for a signed cover, I believe. That's the signed cover here, I believe. That's the one. And you've got the $50. And of course, the one I'm interested in, you should not be surprised when you see this. It's this one here. So this is a character called Yara. And you can tell why I'm drawn to her already. $30. I'm most likely going to be backing this campaign just to get that poster because it looks really badass. I want to get it framed for my room. And I did tease Eric about this today on a live stream where I sent in a super chat to Geeks and Gamers. I'm going to leave that video here for you at the end of this video. It's a pretty interesting watch, actually. And thanks to Ryan Kinnell, who actually got to my StreamYard chat and read that question out just before they were closing shop for the day on that live stream. So thank you very much, Ryan. But you know what? This interests me a lot. She is going to be part of ISOM #1 from what I could glean. So that's going to be exciting. But I'll tell you why I'm interested in this campaign, okay? Because first of all, I don't know if this character will appeal to me. It might be great, right? I'm more interested to see how Eric July comes across as a writer because the man can certainly, he's got the gift of the gab. He really has. He can talk the talk. He can walk the walk. The guy's as based as they come and he lives in Texas. But why I'm very curious about this campaign, it's raised over $1 million already just to get these issues out. It's probably going to go on to make $3 million in the next, I would say, 3 weeks, maybe even before that. And what I think of when I see something like this, because nobody likes Marvel, nobody likes DC anymore, their days are long behind them. Now, when I think to the early 90s, when I used to go to comic book conventions, these would be like they'll be like conventions or comic book marts that will be held in a massive office space somewhere in London. You just take your flyer, you pay like $1 or £1 at the door with the flyer. You walk in, you barter with dealers behind the counters about the various stacks of comics you wanted. And at that time, you had artists like Mark Silvestri, Jim Lee, Will Spataccio, Eric Larson, Stephen Platt, that's who I'm thinking of, Dale Keown. They all defected from Marvel and they all set up shop with Image Comics.
This is A&M Comics and Books in Miami. It's been my local comic shop since I was a little kid. I can't begin to count how many times I've walked into this store. But I can still remember, years later, how absolutely nuts it was in the early 90s when Image Comics first launched.
Observers say it could be the next Superman or Spider-Man comic. Fans gathered to snap up the first editions. More than 100 people lined up for hours outside a Hollywood, California comic book store to buy a signed copy of Youngblood.
Having a great time studying.
Image Comics, if you don't know anything about them, I mean, those are the guys who got me into female comic book characters, actually, because when he had J. Scott Campbell doing some amazing artwork for Gen 13, I was like, oh man, I can really get behind this. Travis Cheris was another great artist they had there. So, you had all of that, and then, you know what? Those guys, those comic book artists were absolute rock stars. People just lost their minds because they had a big fan following. They established their fan base with Marvel Comics, but then Marvel did the dirty on them. They didn't pay them the royalties they were due. So with all the money that Jim Lee and co did earn, they all set up shop with Image Comics in California, and those were great times, man. I really miss those days. And the reason why I'm going to be backing Eric July for this comic, ISOM #1, because this looks like it's going to generate that same mass hysteria Okay, I find that really, really fascinating, and I'm kind of curious to see how far this goes, because Eric July, like I said, this guy is he's a rapper, he's a musician, he raps to heavy metal riffs, he's pretty badass actually. But I would say, Eric, do trim your beard a little bit, because it's getting on the side of a savage, wild man. But he's a funny guy as well, and he can take a joke. I've hated some of the awful comments I have seen on Twitter regarding his success with this launch so far. People calling him all sorts of racist names. I don't understand when somebody gets success like he does. And look, Eric July has said so himself, like, look, this is the beginning of whatever. Things are going to go wrong. He's acknowledged that. He's going to address customers' concerns about the comic books. The feedback from his own Geeks and Gamers squad, that's going to be very interesting. But, you know, if you just scroll down to Twitter through his Twitter feed, someone called Stu Movie and Film News, they took a look at the comic and they said, look, it's not for them. Eric July just says, sorry to hear that. They'll be around if you choose. I think he meant to say if you change your mind. That's what he probably meant to say. But people generally are stoked for this. They are genuinely excited to see what happens. Now, there could be that side of the whole compass whereby people will get this comic. Some people might like it. Some people might not. I don't know. It's going to be, I think people might be divided. Having not received a comic at the moment, I don't know what it's going to be like. But when I get paid on Friday, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and order a comic just to support Eric July and just to get it out there that people like him can, instead of sitting there and talking about the state of entertainment, and obviously the big corporations aren't prepared to listen to you, just go out there and do it yourself. That makes a lot more sense. Yellow Flash 2 apparently is launching their comic book very, very soon. Eric July just got there before he did. I'm sure Yellow Flash 2 is going to get big numbers for his comic book title as well, which I can't wait to see what that's going to be like. I'm curious to see what mass hysteria this will generate, because right now, Marvel, DC, any other comic book creations out there, no one's talking about them. But Eric July, with his own hard-earned cash, blood, sweat, and tears, he's got not just this comic ready, he's got others ready. They're going to be rolled out when needed to be, but even he didn't expect to make $1 million in just over 24 hours. It's a pretty insane early success story so far. I mean, Eric has talked about branching out into movies, into video games. I would suggest, if anybody knows Eric and you show him this video, I will suggest he gets a t-shirt line out there of all the individual characters, because back in the day you had graffiti designs. They used the Marvel characters without Marvel's permission, but they made some of the best t-shirts ever made. But then they got permission from DC Comics to produce their comic book characters for them. I'm obviously wearing one right now, Wonder Woman, like a 1940s style Wonder Woman, which is really, really awesome. And you've got the graffiti logo right there. So I'm all about that. And I'd like Eric July and the Ripperverse to start making their own t-shirts based around their soon-to-be, hopefully, iconic comic book characters. So folks, if you enjoyed this little video today, make sure you hit the like button below. Make sure you like or even subscribe to the subscribe button. And if I were you, and if you were me, I would check out the next video.
Oh, God.
Kung Fu Hot Dog says, morning, beautiful people. Congrats, Eric July. Are your comics M-rated, or do they echo the golden age of Marvel? Will there be eventual character tease? Because I already love Yara and want her body on my chest. When Eric turns 80, will he be old Rippa?
Make those body pillows.
I'll still be young by then, but oh man. As far as like, I don't know what our fucking plan is with what was the first thing that he wanted to know about, because he kind of laid a lot on me. That person, if you just
let me
start there.
He said, are the comics M-rated, or do they echo the golden age?
So with that, let me.
That's a good question.
It is a good question. No, this is not M-rated. I will for sure do those in the future, but this is not M-rated. I wanted to write some for a lot of our stories to be like, okay, this person teen and them out 16 or they 65. This is something that they can get something out of. I don't want to write down to the audience like I don't want to write like a bunch of kids shit because I don't want people to, kids don't stay kids. You know what I mean? I want people to be able to be into something and they like the shit and be able to keep up with it as they age. So that's kind of my approach. And to your point, you mentioned old Marvel, like that's when the shit was the best. So that's kind of my writing style. If I do something separate, that's going to be like, let's say a more mature thing, like because it makes sense for that character, then I would like make it very, very clear.
Run for your life! I'll cover you!